Hello and welcome everyone back to the SCAYLE debates, where five experts risk their reputation trying to answer questions that have been politely ignored for the last 20 years in retail. Now, let's see, where were we? Last week, Lee Trotter made it 3 wins from our 5 debates, and depending on who you ask, he's either becoming a retail oracle or the only one who's still reading his notes out there. As a result, we encourage everyone, as they're watching the debates, keep track of your best answer and vote at the end of these debates. That's the idea. This week's question sounds simple, but it is somewhat existential, which is, when does a customer really enter their decision-making process? And this is really an important question for any kind of brand trying to sell something online. Isn't this who we're always trying to solve for, is that customer element? Do customers care about total cost of ownership? No, they do not. And so we're walking this tightrope between experience and expectation, and how are these going to meet here? And at the end of the day, I think what you'll find from the debaters is a very, very balanced view. Some people just dive right into the answer. Some folks refuse to answer and go off on their own mechanism. But if you're thinking about it from a philosophical point of view in the brand, really there are 2 paths in the woods that diverge. And which path are you going to take? Are you going to take the path where you're trying to make a sale? Or are you trying to take the path where you are developing a relationship with the customer? And if you build if you're on the relationship path rather than the transactional path, it's a lot healthier for the long-term business. But there are differences in these sorts of areas. Ultimately, most people have found they're between 7 and 10 touch points before a consumer actually makes a transaction. And so in some sense, we're always in that decision-making process, and it'll be interesting to hear our operators talk about that distinction. As a reminder, this debate series is sponsored by SCAYLE, which is a platform built for enterprise retailer. They promise and deliver 7 months to re-platform, launching new markets in minutes, executing promotions fast and without flaws. No more bottlenecks, no more pain, just a platform that really works. And so we thank you so much for SCAYLE for helping sponsor these conversations, to bring the retail community together and to have some great conversation. I'm Rick Watson. I'm your referee. As you can tell, your part-time narrator and the only one here who will only admit when he skips cookies. So let's hear from our retail leaders. First up, Matt Ezyk.
They start early before they reach your site. So by the time they hit your PDP, they've already made most of the decision that they're looking to make. So customers are influenced by reviews and influencers and marketplaces and content before they even hit your site. PDP optimization has really diminishing returns if your brand narrative is really weak. So brand trust and discovery are the most important things that shape those decisions upstream.
Hey, Matt Ezyk is a person who has clearly met the customer, unlike a lot of roadmaps, which sometimes get stuck in the starting blocks. And so the real answer that Matt provides us is the customer enters the decision-making process whenever it is they want to. And I think what leaders need to keep in mind is the trust and decision-making process happens early. It happens when they think about your brand. It's happening when they're discovering your brand. It's not right before the checkout. Although, in theory, the PDP is the highest converting page on checkout, ultimately because of all the decisions that the consumer has made to get to that point. So, solid answer from Matt. Definitely a strong start. If your customer journey still looks like a map on Dungeons and Dragons, which is, for a few of you geeks in the audience, Matt says, good freaking luck. And you remember D&D? I know Matt does. He's a fan. So next up is Rob Garf talking about how consumer loyalty is fickle and has shifted.
At the end of the day, customers are trying to solve a problem. Historically, that was a very linear shopping and very prescriptive approach. I'm going to go to the mall. I'm going to go to the market. I'm going to go to a strip center and surgically buy something. Of course, with digital, that created this intermediary where a lot of research was done online before going into the store. But what's happening now is customers, consumers, shoppers are trying to solve a problem. Rather saying, I need a new suit, they're saying, I'm going to a wedding in Napa Valley in September. And the way they shop now is in that conversational context in many cases. And so that's where the idea of personal agents come up, where they might ask their personal agent a question that then not only provides the suit, but really gives them an answer for the entire trip that includes travel, hospitality, clothing, accoutrements, whatever the case might be. And so I bring that up in the context of the customer is it's critical, and we talk to brands all day long about this, is understand the customer journey and work backwards to provide the engagement that requires the lowest friction as possible. And that's critical. If we think about loyalty, it was dramatically changed over the pandemic. No matter if you're a luxury retailer or a convenience retailer, anywhere on the spectrum, it came down to convenience and trust. There's quality in there as well, of course, that never goes away, but convenience and trust. And anything brands can do to create convenience is critical and break down that friction between inspiration and purchase.
Now, Rob breaks down a little bit different question we're talking about. He is talking about how the consumer journey has changed. And so implicitly, he's saying consumers have shifted from going to the store, buying something just for any reason, to solving a specific problem in their life. What are the holes in my wardrobe? How do I fit it? I think we would all like Rob Garf's life, going to a wedding in Napa and trying to find a suit that, you know, if push comes to shove, you could actually scrub red wine out of. And that's something you could actually type into the LLMs, which would be, I think, important. So anything that brands can do to create that convenience is critical. Is this combination of reducing friction with convenience and creating trust really when the consumer enters the decision-making process? I didn't fully hear that in the answer, but I appreciate Rob taking a swing at it. And as always, he provides a lot of great wisdom. Next up is Suze Dowling, who talks about brands overcomplicating and how are they going to deliver on what it is they're promising, or are they even focused on it at all?
Where and when. I'd say every founder says the same thing here. It's like, we start with the customer first. And like, so much of the time that is so not true. I think if you like actually then ask them a couple of questions, they always are actually starting with like, what's convenient for the business, what's the cheapest to ship, what their systems can already handle, what fits in the budget. And then I think the customer kind of just gets bolted on at the end, where it's like they're saying their customer first, but it's so superficial and glossy. And I think such a dangerous game to play. I think starting with the customer itself, honestly, it's so hard. It means building backwards, because it's really asking, what moment in their life do we want to own? What frustration of theirs do we want to solve? But it also really importantly means making some pretty uncomfortable trade-offs, because a lot of the time you might be saying no to a cheaper option or the faster launch. And you're doing that because you're putting the customer at the heart of everything. So like a pattern, we talk about DWC instead of DTC. So for us, that stands with direct with consumer. And so we're not saying that just as like a channel strategy. It's more a philosophy, right? It means saying the customer isn't just this voice that you layer on after the fact. It's the customer itself is the process. So it's really, if you're DWC, it's like, how do you collapse the distance between what the customer feels and like what we as a company do? So it's listening to them straight from their mouth. So like, I'm still jumping on with customers each week and talking directly to them myself. It's reading like the reviews, it's watching and kind of really looking how they experience the checkout process, right? And then it's feeding all of that back into your decision making. And it's not kind of just filtering that as a marketing voice. It's really about how are we like living and breathing this in the DNA of our business. And I think that in the people that are saying it in a much more superficial way, where they're just having it be this afterthought, I think that you end up solving for oftentimes like an internal efficiency that's easier for you than a true customer pain point or friction where they feel really seen. And I think when you really operate more with this DWC concept, you're building backwards from the moment that they're trying to solve in their lives, and you stop asking yourselves like, what's the shortest path or what's easiest, and you're saying what removes the most friction for them. And I think those trade-offs, even though sometimes it is harder and honestly sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish the customer didn't feel this way, but it makes you have a better end product. And I think that it's something where it's always worthwhile putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, because it's really something that pays off in the long term. Like, it's something that builds that trust, it builds that relationship. And I think customers sense it. Like I always say, at the end of the day, we are humans selling to other humans, and we're creating for humans. And so I think it's not really like, should they come into the decision-making process? I mean, yes, they should. When? From the very beginning, before day zero. And it should never be something that's like retrofitted at the end. And that is so much better, not just for the customer, but for your business. And so it's just, yeah, it's not, they don't come into the process. Like, what is that language? Like, they are the process. Like, that's what it means for direct with consumer. And I think if anyone takes anything away, like, be direct with consumer.
Suze Dowling, our resident rapper. You down with DWC? Yeah, you know me. I didn't know we needed another acronym in retail, but Suze just straight created one from scratch. So that's a first. Here on the SCAYLE Debates, you won't get this kind of stuff otherwise. Even Gartner can't do it this well. That's all I'm saying. Let me just read back to you. She's essentially calling all D2C brands to the carpet, saying like, we have a roadmap, we're going to do it anyway, and we're not really considering the customer. We just sort of tell ourselves this story after the fact that customers were the center of our experience. In other words, the only place that the customer is at the center is on our freaking slide decks, which everyone knows how they feel about slide decks. Like, if I had never had to do another slide deck in my lifetime, I would be pretty happy. So what does this tell us about industry standards and the bar? The bar is low, people. And so Suze challenges us to get up off the floor and start running toward real customer-centric goals. Because if we do so, then we will be part of where the consumer... Where does the consumer start the transaction? She's saying they're always there, if I'm reading it properly. So appreciate Suze and her wisdom and her weekly TED Talks for us. Who's next up? Our resident dinosaur digger, Dave Finnegan. So thanks, and we will hear from him next.
The customer has never left the decision process or the shopping process. The myth is that the funnel starts when they click. In reality, the customer is on a cultural journey that includes their memory of what they've done in the past with you, what they've done at other retailers, their social experiences that they have, the other brand narratives that they interact with, they carry that into every decision. I think shopping, as I think about it from an anthropology perspective, it's a ritual with past, present, and kind of future meanings. The moment decision for shopping is distributed. It starts with community and continues through, thoughtful exploration and understanding what's out there, and then it culminates in checkout. I think retailers who treat this decision process as a funnel, they miss a really important internal truth, and that is that they're stepping into a story that's already in progress.
First of all, I think anyone who has a skull on their wall when they're delivering an answer, you have to respect, because that means, is that the remains of customers that were forgotten by retailers? We need to follow up with Finn after that for there. Otherwise, Dave goes very meta on us here, almost like Neo and Morpheus in the Matrix. There is no spoon, there is no funnel. Well, marketers in the audience would beg to differ, especially with their freaking conversations with the CFO. That said, I understand the point is that commerce is culture and people are consumers 24/7. They're husbands, wives, sons, daughters 24/7. There's no distinction between when you enter a funnel and you're not. Do you enter the funnel when you land on a website, or do you enter the funnel when you get on the bus? The answer is yes. You're in the funnel all the time. And so the consumer, when you think about your relationship with the consumer, you have to think a little bit long-term and developing those relationships, and don't think so transactionally. That's where I think marketers trip up. And I think CFOs, when we're having these god-awful ROAS conversations that nobody wants to be a part of, then that's a big problem. Another word I would like to put on hiatus. But thank you, Dave. Hopefully that won't be me on your skull wall when we do our next debate. Next up is our reigning champion, Lee Trotter from Data Realm. We'll see what he has to say about customers entering their decision-making process.
I think a company needs to look at who the customer is. And that's the brand, the company that's doing the buying. And then whoever is doing the selling, be it an agency or a vendor, needs to identify who the customer is. And you can say, I'm selling to ABC company, but internally to the company, are you selling to the IT group, the business group, the marketing group? Who are you selling to? And then who is supporting that? So if the IT group holds the check and they are the ones writing the dollars, who is really your customer? So I'd actually like to say, like, this depends on the drama within the company, right? Because, your traditional large company has all of these siloed business units that are fighting each other for like, oh, well, this is what you really need. And marketing is going, that's not what we really need. And IT is the one setting the requirements. So who's really the customer there? What I like to do in those types of situations is help educate versus just sell, right? So the goal is to say, this is what this will get you. We understand your process. We can come to the marketing department or the business unit and help educate them to educate the other teams that they have to deal with, right? And that's ultimately where the customer comes into the buying process, is it's a team effort versus just selling into one person. And that business unit wants it, but at the end of the day, someone else is writing the check and says, no, we're actually going this way. And I had that happen a number of times when I worked as a sales engineer.
You could tell Lee is like a prize fighter in charge of his audience. And I think he goes a little bit B2B on us in this conversation, which might apply to some of you in the audience, which is buying as a team effort. And there's definitely a large mirror that he's holding up to us, confronting all those terrible wrong things and decisions that we made at some point. Who's supporting us? Is it IT holding us in check? Is it the marketing team? Is it the CFO who's actually writing those checks? Who's the customer? And if the person who has the decision to keep doing business with you is actually not your customer, then you've started off on the wrong foot. And so at the end of the day, if it is whoever's writing the check within sort of a team organization and not the user, is the tail really wagging the dog here? Isn't this what we get in every conversation? So especially if you're thinking about re-platform, you need to think about all these customers. But I think it's a little bit different in direct consumer, where the person making the decision is often the person who holds the purse string as well. But we're going to have to see what you think. Thank you so much, Lee, for your wisdom. Ultimately, that is going to be it for week 6, the debate where everyone claims to put the customer first. We've heard from all of our debaters. We learned the customer enters the decision process whenever they feel like it, whenever trust is built, and usually long before the brand realizes that they're there. We have 5 contenders. We have 1 reigning champ, and we have 1 poll for you to participate in. Vote for your winner. Hopefully you've been keeping track. Who won debate 6? When does a customer enter their decision process? Matt Ezyk, Dave Finnegan, Rob Garf, Suze Dowling, and Lee Trotter. Awesome. So we have a champion this week, and we have a repeat winner. Suze Dowling, I'm so pleased that she was able to pull it out this week. 5 votes to 3. Our defending champ, Lee Trotter, gave an admirable effort. He tied with Finn, Ezyk, Rob Garf. Sorry, no votes this time, but let's celebrate Suze, the Australian originally champion, and her answers really put us in the mode that we are kidding ourselves when we're saying a lot of times that we're putting the customer first, and we really need to introduce a new acronym, DWC, not DTC. So write that down for your notebook, use it in your next board meeting, and watch all the faces. What the heck is that person talking about? That's okay. That means you'll have the upper hand. And that's why you're here listening, to give you the upper hand in your next board meeting. All that to say, congrats, Suze. This is debate 6 of a 10-part series. Next week, we're going to eat some turkey. We're not coming back. So if you show up, it's not my problem. Your relatives. But actually, if you show up for the webinar, you won't have to deal with that drunk uncle at your Thanksgiving, which is probably fine. So in 2 weeks, see you again for debate number 7. Same bat time, same bat channel. I'm Rick Watson, signing off.